Hello and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller, a holistic canine nutrition and well-being consultant and the co-creator of the F.E.T.C.H framework. Along with my incredible colleague, Stacy Renfrey, my aim is to help you feel less overwhelmed and more confident in taking a holistic approach to your dog's health through integrating evidence-based nutrition with spiritual wisdom. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for a little March Minisodes series that I'm doing throughout this month. Lucky and I are in the midst of a big move, so for the month of March, I'm sharing some shorter solo episodes with you that are some of my musings that I've had lately and that I hope might be helpful to you. They're things that I've been spending some time thinking about, bringing together many of the conversations that we have over here on the podcast about different ways of nourishing our dogs and ourselves on multiple levels. And once Lucky and I are settled, I'll update you on what exciting new things that we are up to, and I'll also let you know how the little munchkin is doing with these big changes. But until then, I hope that you enjoy these chats directly with you. On that note, let's go. So if you listen to the F.E.T.C.H First Friday series of episodes here on the podcast that come out the first Friday of the month, you'll know that Stacy Renfrey of Hozo Hounds and I have joined forces to create a brand new community space for soul-led dog mamas like you who are looking for more support in how to best nourish their dogs and themselves, mind, body, and soul. A couple of weeks ago, one of our amazing members asked a question that I think a lot of people have, which is, we picked up the wrong food at the store. Can my dog eat it? I wanted to share how I responded to this question using the F.E.T.C.H framework to help our member work out whether or not the new food was a good option for her dog. The reason I want to share it here is because I think even though it may seem like a simple question, it's so common. And I think a lot of us can really empathize with feeling overwhelmed and worried that we're making the wrong decision, right? Like we just want to get it right. I want to help you move through that paralyzing place into one of clarity and confidence, because that's what the framework is designed to do, and so is the membership. So it gives you all a way to start evaluating these kinds of things for your own dog using the F.E.T.C.H framework to guide you. It's also a great example of a question that we can help you unpack inside of our monthly Q&A sessions when you're in the membership. So here's a snapshot of how you can use the F.E.T.C.H framework to help you navigate these kinds of situations. So our member wanted to know whether or not she could feed her dog a commercial raw lamb food when her dog is currently trialing a commercial gently cooked beef food. A family member had picked up the wrong food and she was just concerned as to whether or not they could use it. So for a bit of context, they are trying to work out if the dog has a potential food sensitivity. So they're going through a bit of a mini elimination diet of feeding only one protein for a period of 1 month, then introducing a second protein exclusively for 1 month, followed by a third protein exclusively for the 3rd month, and then testing the suspected problematic protein exclusively to see if there's a reaction. And just to note, if your dog has a health condition, you need to do an elimination diet under the supervision of a canine nutrition consultant and or your holistic vet. This particular dog just seems to have a potentially mild issue, and the dog is being switched from kibble to fresh food. So the short answer to her question of whether or not she can feed it is yes, she can try it, but test how the dog does with it, and then use this framework to help. So we start off with F.E.T.C.H with F, which is for fresh food. In this dog's case, knowing just a little bit about his background, he's new to fresh feeding generally. He's been on gently cooked for about a month, and the guardian is learning about which foods work for him and which don't at the moment. So there's going to be some trial and error. I generally recommend for dogs that may have some gut or skin issues that we start with gently cooked, because that is often easier for the dog to digest. This particular dog had some mild redness on his skin and ears. So the move from kibble, which is warming energetically and inflammatory, could actually just do the trick itself to resolve the redness. But we're putting on our Sherlock Holmes deerstalker cap and investigating. So the guardian started the mini elimination diet with beef, and as far as I know, that went well, but instead of beef, her husband picked up raw lamb. So we actually have 3 factors here: a new protein that we'll want to evaluate, a very warm protein, and I'll share a bit more on energetics in a minute, and the fact that the food is raw, which is different for the dog, and it's also cooler energetically than gently cooked. And contrary to a lot of popular belief in the holistic canine space, not every dog does well on raw, including my own dog, Lucky. So I would suggest that, yes, she can certainly try giving some to the dog because we're building a history of what he actually tolerates, but keep these factors in mind in case there are any kind of reactions. And just another note, if this were a strict elimination diet, you would not want to veer from the plan because you could be introducing factors into the mix that make it really difficult to distinguish what ingredient is causing the issue. It can actually take the body around 12 weeks to eliminate traces of a protein. So if you introduce a new protein before you have fully tested one and the dog has a reaction, you really risk not knowing which protein is the actual problem, and you may have to start from scratch again. So when starting a new food and a new supplement, I always suggest starting slowly. So I recommend just feeding, say, a tablespoon or so of the new food at first to see how the dog does. If there's an immediate reaction, that tells you that protein is a no-go. If the dog does well with a tablespoon, start increasing the amount of the new food and reducing the amount of the old food until you get to where you are only feeding the new food. Again, you want to monitor the dog. So what are you actually monitoring? Any vomiting or excessive diarrhea? Some loose stools during a transition are not uncommon, but it's more a concern of if it persists, and so we just want to kind of keep our eye on it. You might see some excessive itching or redness on the skin, ears and paws. True food allergies are actually quite rare, but you do want to watch for them. So if you're thinking allergies, think of somebody like with a peanut allergy, like it's immediate and severe. Most dogs with food issues actually have sensitivities or intolerances, which generally stem from an imbalanced gut microbiome. And these can actually take a little bit of time to show up. So you just want to start noting any symptoms, including changes in behavior. So now the second thing we want to start looking at is E, and that's for energetics. We're going to be looking at the energetics of food, and we're going to look at the energetics of your dog. If you don't know what your dog's energetics is, then you can actually download our free PDF on decoding your dog's energetic Pawprint. I'm going to leave the link to that in the show notes. So like I mentioned, lamb is a warming protein, and knowing that and knowing your dog's energetics can be so helpful in deciding if a warming protein like lamb would be helpful for your dog. So for example, Stacy's dog Ted is a warm boy. Lamb in the winter is fine because it's really cold outside and Ted's body is still kind of working to keep himself warm, even though he's a warm dog. But in the summer, absolutely not. Feeding him lamb every day for 1 month, like the mini elimination diet that this dog that we're talking about is on, would send Ted into hot energetics. And that's where inflammation and dis-ease state take root. My dog, Lucky, on the other hand, is a cool boy, and he can tolerate lamb all year round. This isn't to say you only feed warming proteins to a cool dog or only feed cooling proteins to a warm dog. You're aiming for an overall neutral to warming profile for a cool dog and an overall neutral to cooling profile for a warm dog. So in the case of this particular pup, I don't know his energetic paw print, so I would suggest to the guardian that she download our PDF and look at that, but I would also just test the dog with the lamb and see how he does. Again, starting with just a little bit and gradually increase. Assuming there are no issues, she could look at adding lamb into his rotation of proteins. If he had a bit of tummy upset and she wanted to rule out whether or not that was due to the lamb or whether or not that was due to the raw, she could try the pup on some gently cooked lamb food and see if that makes a difference. Again, experimentation and keeping an eye on how he does. But just a note, do not gently cook a raw, complete food. You don't want to heat up the bone in a raw, complete food, as this can cause obstruction and tears in the digestive tract. Purchase a pre-made, gently cooked food. Okay, so we've looked at fresh foods, we've looked at energetics, now we're moving on to T, targeted. So in this case, the targeted approach would be identifying what it is that you're testing. So are you testing if the dog can tolerate raw? Then, like I said, test raw and gently cooked of the same protein. Are you testing the protein itself? See how he does with the lamb, and if he doesn't do great, try a different protein. That will help rule it out. And just remember too, this particular dog is new to fresh food generally, so there's inevitably going to be some ups and downs as his body not only gets used to having more fresh food, but also starts to detox from the kibble. A bit of constipation and a bit of loose stool here and there doesn't mean the dog isn't doing well with the new food that you're trialing. We're starting to look for trends. Okay, so we've done fresh food, energetics, targeted. Now we're moving on to the C component of the F.E.T.C.H framework, which is curiosity. And I've kind of hinted at curiosity throughout all of this actually, which is just watch your dog and take notes. How are their stools? Is there any vomiting? If so, is there undigested food in it, or is it just bile? Is it happening at a particular time of day? Is there any excessive itching or paw nibbling? Are there any changes to behavior? What time of day are the behavior changes happening? Start to notice if there are any patterns. And again, this is something that we can actually walk members through in our Q&A sessions. So now we're moving on to H. So we've looked at fresh food, energetics, targeted approaches, curiosity, and now we're H, holistic. Although we'll look at patterns separately, it's worth noting that patterns can be related to the food, but they can also be related to other things. So for example, are you using commercial pharmaceutical flea and tick treatments? Are you using floor cleaners and washing detergent with fragrances? Because the red skin on this particular dog and the upset tummy might not actually be due to food intolerances, but to the pesticides or the chemical fragrances, for example. Have you started a routine that might be unsettling to your dog and that's causing some tummy issues? Are they new to daycare, for example? How are your stress levels? Our dogs pick up on our emotions, and Stacy and I have seen time and time again how this directly impacts dogs' health. So these are just some things to start considering. So in short, yes, I would say that this guardian could try the lamb and see how it goes in this particular case. She mentioned that they now have 4 bags of the lamb, and I would say as well, you can pop those into the freezer, but I do suggest that when you're trying a new protein, just buy the minimum so that you can test it. If your dog does well with it, then you know it's something that you can add into your rotation, and then you can buy more. So I hope that was helpful. Was it? Have you had similar issues? If so, how did you approach it? You can apply the F.E.T.C.H framework to pretty much anything that you're exploring and weighing up with your dog, and even with yourself, to be honest. If you enjoy this approach to your dog's health and you're looking to be surrounded and supported by other like-minded dog guardians, then come join us in the F.E.T.C.H membership. We have 2 tiers depending on the kind of support and resources that you'd benefit the most from, but you can start out with us for less than a cup of coffee per month. We are currently open to founding members, which means that you'll benefit from entering at not only the lowest price that we'll ever be offering, but you also get to help shape this community so it reflects exactly what it is that you need. We would love to have you over there. Come on over to patreon.com/learnfetch for more details and to join. I've left this link in the show notes. All right, until next week.